"You brought a homemade cake," she said, eyebrows raised, like I'd carried in a dead cat. I hadn't even set it on the counter yet. "Mum, we don't eat poor people's food." I just stood there for a moment. My hands were still wrapped around the foil-covered tray. It was warm from the oven, still smelled of chocolate and cinnamon. I had baked it early that morning, sifted the flour, melted the butter, cracked the eggs one by one, just like my own mother had taught me 50 years ago, the same recipe I used for Karen's birthdays when she was little, the same one Jenna asked for every time she came over. But now I was standing in my daughter's kitchen, the party already underway, and all I could think was, should I turn around and leave, or pretend I hadn't heard? "I'm sorry," I said finally, setting the tray down on the edge of the marble counter. "I thought she'd like it." Karen didn't even look. She was arranging cupcakes from some bakery, expensive ones, all pastel icing and little edible gold stars. "She doesn't eat sugar anymore," she said. "We're trying to teach her healthier habits, whole foods, you know." Behind her, the living room was full of kids and parents, balloons tied to the backs of chairs, music playing too loud. Jenna was somewhere in that crowd, probably in her new dress I hadn't seen yet. I'd picked it out from a catalogue, paid for it over the phone. Karen turned back to her friends and said, too loudly, "Anyway, sorry for the smell. My mum insists on baking like it's 1952. They laughed. Not all of them, but enough. I stood there for another moment. I saw the half-empty coffee pot, the untouched fruit tray, the paper plates with cartoon unicorns. I'd been so sure she'd be happy. I'd wrapped her gifts the night before. A book she'd mentioned, a handmade bracelet, a little wooden box I'd found at the market and polished myself. I reached into my bag, touched the ribbon on the box. Then I looked up. Karen was still laughing. She didn't look at me. I turned and left. No one stopped me. No one followed. Outside, the sky was unusually blue for March. I walked to my car with the cake in my arms, feeling the weight of it. Not heavy, not really. Just warm, like it still had hope in it. I didn't cry. I didn't curse. I just put the tray on the passenger seat, fastened the belt across it like I used to when Jenna was a baby, and drove home. The house was quiet when I came back. Always is. But that day it felt different. I locked the door, set the cake down on the kitchen counter, and stood there, listening. No ticking clock, no humming fridge, just the distant sound of a lawnmower somewhere down the block. I took off my coat slowly, like I had all the time in the world. On the table, the cake sat untouched. The foil had started to loosen, revealing the edge where the sugar crust had cracked just a little. It smelled like home. I made myself a cup of tea, not herbal, proper black tea, strong enough to stain the cup. Sat down. I looked at the cake, then at my hands. They weren't shaking. That surprised me. I've been through worse, I told myself. And it was true. I buried a husband at 52, paid off a mortgage alone, built a life with nothing but a sewing machine and a stubborn heart. I've worked standing on tired legs, scrubbed other people's floors, taken in mending from women half my age who never learned to hold a needle right. And I never once asked anyone for more than a little kindness. I sipped my tea. Still hot. Still bitter. The gifts were in my bag. I pulled them out one by one. The bracelet, simple, silver, with a tiny bird charm. I'd had it engraved. Fly, Jenna. The book she'd asked for was wrapped in brown paper with twine. No glitter, no plastic bows, just care. And the little wooden box, smooth, dark oak, with a hidden latch. I'd found it at a flea market, cleaned it, oiled it, lined it with velvet. I set them all on the table in front of me. Then I did something I hadn't done in years. I laughed. Not loud, not bitter. Just a small sound, like something cracking open inside me, because it was so absurd. I had tried so hard. And for what? For a seat at a plastic table with juice boxes and bakery cupcakes? I leaned back in the chair and looked around the kitchen. The wallpaper was old, curling at the corners. The table was scratched from decades of use. The linoleum had worn thin by the sink. But it was mine, every inch of it. Karen had once said, "You should sell this place and move into something smaller, closer to us." I'd nodded, but never did. Now I was glad. If I'd sold this house, where would I go today? I took the foil off the cake completely, cut a slice, put it on one of my good plates, the ones I never use because you never know when company might come. I was the company now. I ate slowly. It was good, moist, just the right amount of sugar. Not poor people's food, just food, made with love, not labels. I thought of Jenna, 10 years old, bright, curious, funny when she's not watching for her mother's approval. She used to come over after school. We'd bake together, play cards, read aloud. I taught her to embroider once. She made a crooked little rose and was so proud of it. I hadn't seen her in weeks. Karen always had reasons. School, piano lessons, someone's party. Or just, we're busy. And I never pressed. I didn't want to be the difficult grandmother, the needy one. I finished the slice, wiped the crumbs off the table and stood up. Then I opened the hall closet. Inside, on the top shelf, was a box of old photos. I pulled it down and carried it to the living room, sat on the floor, crossed my legs like I used to when I was younger, and my knees didn't complain. I went through the pictures, one by one. Karen with missing teeth, holding up a science project. Me and Harold on our wedding day, black and white, a little overexposed. Jenna as a baby, wrapped in a yellow blanket, yawning. Picture after picture. Proof that I had been there, that I had mattered. Sometimes when people are done with you, it feels like you were never real to them. Like you were only useful, until you weren't. But those pictures, they don't lie. I was someone. I am someone. The light outside was fading when I put the last photo back. I returned the box to the shelf. My back ached a little as I stood up. In the kitchen, the rest of the cake sat on the counter, half covered now. I considered throwing it away, but then I thought, no. I found a container, packed up a few slices, and put them in the freezer. You never know when you'll want something sweet. The rest I wrapped carefully. Tomorrow I'd take it to the church. There's a little community table there. People leave things, take things, no names, no judgments. Let someone else enjoy it. Someone who won't turn up their nose. Someone who might need a reminder that there's still kindness in the world. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the creak of the house settling around me. The radiator hissed. The pipes moaned a little. Sounds I've known for decades. But everything felt different, like the silence was waiting for me to speak. Around midnight, I got up, put the kettle on again. Some habits never leave you. I sat at the kitchen table in my robe, cup in hand, and thought, when did it all change? When did Karen start looking at me like I embarrassed her? It wasn't always this way. I remember when she was young, stubborn, full of ideas, and always asking questions. We used to fight sometimes, like any mother and daughter, but she'd come to me when it mattered. When she got her heart broken at 16, it was me she cried to. When she got her first job offer out of college, I was the first call. She even moved back home for a year after the divorce. Jenna was just a baby then. And we shared everything. Meals, bills, night feedings. I didn't expect her to stay grateful forever, but I never thought she'd outgrow me like an old coat. At 2 in the morning, I went to the secretary desk in the corner of the living room. I hadn't opened it in months. Inside were my documents, neatly filed folders, bills, bank statements, letters I'd kept. One folder had Karen's name on it. I pulled it out. It was thicker than I remembered. There were receipts from years ago, school fees, down payments, even a loan I gave her to cover a tax penalty. I'd forgotten most of them. I never kept track for repayment. That's what mothers do, right? They help. They give. No strings. But looking at those papers now, I felt something unfamiliar. Not bitterness, not regret. Clarity. I had given and given, not because I expected praise, but because I thought love meant always saying yes. But love without respect, what is it? A leash? A habit? A slow erasure? I put the folder back and took out my checkbook. Flipped to the last page. The last payment I'd made was for Jenna's summer camp deposit, $300, a month ago. I closed it and went to bed. The next morning, I called the bank. "Mrs. Beecham?" the young man on the line said. "What can I help you with?" "I'd like to make some changes to my accounts," I told him. "Effective immediately." We went through security questions. Then I said, "I want to suspend all automatic transfers to my daughter and revoke her access to my accounts." There was a pause. I could hear him typing. "Are you sure you want to do that, Mom?" "Yes," I said. "I'm sure." I could hear his tone shift. A bit more respectful now. Maybe it was the steadiness in my voice. Maybe he'd had a grandmother too. "I'll initiate the suspension now," he said. "You'll need to come in and sign the revocation documents in person. I'll be there at 10. I hung up and felt nothing. No glee, no triumph. Just a quiet space where guilt used to be. I dressed slowly. Slacks, blouse, cardigan, lipstick, just a little. The kind I used to wear when Harold and I went to the diner on Sundays. At the bank, I sat across from a woman named Margaret, older than the voice on the phone. Calm hands, calm face. "We've suspended the transfers," she said after I signed. "And once this is notarized, your daughter's authorization will be fully removed." She didn't ask questions, just gave me the paperwork. Before I left, I asked, "How much have I sent to her in the past 5 years?" She tapped at her keyboard, scanned the screen. "Just over $82,000, she said. "That includes the house repairs, education support, and regular allowances." I nodded, though my stomach twisted a little. "That's not counting the gifts," she added gently. "Of course not," I said. "We don't put love on a spreadsheet." But still, 82,000. And I wasn't welcome to bring a cake. I stepped outside into the cold, bright air. Something in me felt clean, like I'd just left behind a heavy coat I no longer needed. I didn't go straight home after the bank. Instead, I drove to the post office. There was a letter I'd been meaning to send. A thank you note to the librarian who found me that out-of-print poetry book last month. I mailed it, then sat in my car for a while, watching the people come and go. A young mother with 2 toddlers. An older man shuffling with a cane. A teenager in a puffer jacket, earbuds in. Nobody looked at me, and I liked it that way. There's a kind of freedom in being invisible, if you choose it yourself. On the way home, I passed Karen's neighborhood. I could have turned in, driven past her house just to see if Jenna was out front playing. But I didn't. Not because I was angry. Because I didn't want to stand outside my daughter's life anymore, peering in like a beggar. I drove home, made lunch, ate it at the kitchen table alone, and not lonely. Then the phone rang. "Karen?" I let it go to voicemail. A minute later, another call. Same number. Then a message. Mum, I think we need to talk. No apology, no explanation, just a flat, professional tone. I didn't respond. Instead, I went to the closet in the hallway, pulled down the metal box where I keep my will, insurance papers, and titles. I laid them out on the dining table and went through them one by one. Nothing in there about respect, nothing about gratitude. But everything, every single asset, was set to pass directly to Karen. Not anymore. I picked up the phone and dialed the number of Mr. Harlan, my attorney. Mrs. Beecham, he said warmly. It's been a while. I'd like to schedule a meeting, I said, as soon as possible. He didn't ask why, just gave me a time. I spent the rest of the afternoon reviewing my notes. I'd kept track, quietly, of everything I'd done for Jenna. Birthday gifts, school fees, the new laptop she got for Christmas. She thought it was from Santa, but I'd paid for half. If I was going to start over, I wanted to do it right. By dinner time, my phone had rung 6 times. Karen again. Then Jenna's name flashed across the screen. I froze. Did Karen tell her something? Was she calling to apologize? Or to say something worse? I didn't answer. It's a strange thing, learning how to say no, especially to the people you've spent your whole life saying yes to. It feels wrong at first, like putting on someone else's coat. But then, if you wait long enough, it starts to feel like protection. I cleaned the kitchen, wiped the counters, watched the sky turn lavender behind the trees. And when I finally sat down, it wasn't because I was tired. It was because I had finished something important. I was no longer waiting to be loved the way I deserved. The law office smelled like old wood and lemon polish. Mr. Harlan greeted me the way he always had, with a warm handshake and a careful look, like he was checking to see if time had done anything irreversible to me since our last meeting. Still sharp as ever, he said with a small smile, ushering me into his office. I sat down, straight-backed. I wasn't here to chat. I want to revise my will, I said. Remove my daughter as beneficiary, establish a trust in my granddaughter's name, and ensure Karen can't access it under any circumstances. His eyebrows rose slightly, but he didn't comment, just reached for a notepad. We went over the assets, the house, the savings accounts, the investment fund I'd built slowly from years of quiet, careful saving. I'd never had much, but I'd never wasted either. And the trust, he said. When do you want Jenna to access it? Not until she turns 25, I said. And only if she's not living under her mother's roof. That part's important. Understood. He typed, printed, filed, notarized. I signed. It took just over an hour to undo decades of assumed inheritance. Afterwards, he walked me to the door. You're not the first mother I've seen make a change like this, he said gently. I'm just sorry it took this long, I replied. He nodded, not unkindly. I stepped back out into the sunlight, and for the first time in weeks, my shadow didn't feel longer than my body. Back home, the phone was ringing again. I let it. The answering machine caught it. Karen's voice, curt. Mum, I just found out you've been to the bank. What's going on? Can you please call me back? She didn't say please like she meant it. She said it like it was punctuation. A few minutes later, a text from Jenna. Grandma, are you okay? Mum seems really upset. That one I stared at for a long time. Was I okay? Yes. And no. I was grieving something I couldn't quite name. Not a death, but a vanishing. The woman I'd been for decades. The peacemaker, the silent supporter, the always available backup plan. She was gone now. and in her place was someone I was still getting to know. That evening, I sat at the kitchen table with the lights low and a slice of the frozen cake thawing beside me. I thought about calling Jenna, about explaining, about trying, once more, to be the bridge between us. But bridges don't get built from one side only. I left my phone on the counter and opened a blank sheet of paper. Then I began to write. Dear Jenna, if you're reading this, then something has shifted between us. Maybe just time, maybe something more. I hope this letter finds you curious, not angry. I'm not writing to explain myself. I'm writing because I owe you more than silence. You've always been the bright spot. Even when your mother and I couldn't see eye to eye, you were the space between us, where love still had room to breathe. I was so proud of you the day you baked that little lopsided pie in my kitchen. You must have been 8. You got flour everywhere, hair, floor, even under your ear somehow. But you stood there, proud as a chef, waiting for it to come out of the oven. That pie was awful. But I ate every crumb because you made it with joy. Joy is rare, Jenna, and I want you to keep it. That's why I've made some decisions, ones your mother won't like. She'll say I've overstepped or been dramatic. Let her. You're old enough to decide what feels true. Here's the truth from my side. I've supported your mother for years. Quietly, financially, emotionally. I never asked for much back. But lately, I've been given less than nothing. Not just indifference, disrespect. When she told me not to bring my cake, the one you used to ask for, because it was poor people's food, she didn't just insult the dessert. She insulted every hour I spent loving you both in the only way I knew how. So I left, and I took the gifts with me, not out of pettiness, but principle. Because love is not a one-way street, and I refuse to keep showing up for people who pretend I'm a burden. But you're not them. I've set something aside for you. Not money, not just. A trust, yes. But more than that. A boundary between you and the cycle I let continue for too long. You won't have access to it until you're older and on your own terms. It's not a reward. It's a message. You matter. Even when others forget to show it. You may hear things from your mother. Things about me that are sharp or twisted to fit her anger. That's her burden, not yours. Ask questions. Demand answers. But never accept cruelty disguised as silence. If you want to come see me, you'll always be welcome. If you need time, I understand. Either way, you are loved, just as you are. No conditions, no qualifications, no performances. Love, Grandma. I folded the letter and slipped it into an envelope, wrote Jenna's name on the front in cursive, the way I used to label her school lunch napkins. I didn't mail it, not yet, but it felt right to have it ready. That night, I slept better than I had in weeks. No dreams, just a quiet, deep breath. In the morning, the sky was grey. I brewed my tea and watched the wind play with the branches outside. My phone buzzed again. A message from Karen. Mum, we need to talk. This is getting out of hand. Maybe for her. For me, it was finally falling into place. I spent that morning doing something I hadn't done in years. Nothing. Not multitasking. Not cooking ahead. Not checking the freezer for what Karen might need, just in case. I didn't sort socks, or pay bills, or refill the sugar jar. I sat in the living room, on the old floral chair by the window, and just watched the street. 2 boys rode by on bikes, shrieking laughter. The postman waved from the corner. A woman in a coat too thin for the weather walked her dog, stopping every few steps to check her phone. Ordinary things, beautiful in their ordinariness. For most of my life, I filled the silence with usefulness. I was always doing, as if doing was proof I mattered. But not today. Today, I was just being. I didn't answer Karen's calls. Not the fifth one. Not the sixth. Not the one where she left a message saying, "You're blowing this out of proportion, Mum." It was just a misunderstanding. It wasn't. It never is when the humiliation is that precise, that public. I didn't need an apology to know it wasn't a misunderstanding. I needed space to remember who I was before I became someone's afterthought. At noon, I walked to the park 2 blocks away, the one where I used to push Jenna on the swings. I passed the bench where Harold used to wait with a newspaper while I did laps. I sat on that bench now and closed my eyes for a moment. A breeze lifted the edge of my scarf. I thought of all the women I've known who disappeared, not because they died, but because their families buried them in roles: caretaker, peacemaker, checkbook. Women who gave everything and got nothing but errands and complaints in return. I wasn't going to be one of them anymore. Back home, I pulled out the sewing kit from the hall cabinet, not because anything needed fixing, but because I wanted to touch something that came from my own hands. I started stitching a square of linen. Nothing fancy, just thread moving through fabric, back and forth. I didn't need it to become anything. I just wanted to feel the rhythm, the steadiness. Mid-stitch, the doorbell rang. For a moment, I didn't move, just stared at the door like it was something unfamiliar. It rang again. I stood, walked over, looked through the peephole. Karen. Her mouth was tight, her eyes darted. She looked like someone trying to act calm when they're already boiling. I didn't open the door. She knocked, then knocked again, louder. "Mum, I know you're home." I didn't say a word. "Mum, this is ridiculous." Still nothing. I watched as her shoulders stiffened. She stood there for another minute, then pulled out her phone and made a call. Probably to me. It rang inside the house. I let it. Finally, she stepped back from the door and shouted, "Fine. If you want to behave like a child, be my guest. But you're hurting Jenna, not just me. Remember that." Then she left. I stood in the hallway for a long time after her car disappeared down the street. Am I hurting Jenna? Maybe. Maybe not. But loving someone doesn't mean handing them the knife and showing them where to cut. I went back to my chair, picked up my stitching, let the thread keep moving, clean and quiet, through the cloth. The next day was quiet again. The kind of quiet that doesn't press, doesn't accuse, just lets you breathe. I folded the letter to Jenna one more time, checked the envelope, and placed it gently in the drawer of my nightstand. Still no rush to send it. Words are like seeds. Sometimes you wait for the right season. By mid-afternoon, I was dusting the shelves in the living room when the doorbell rang again. I didn't rush this time. I finished wiping down the picture frame I was holding, the one with Harold and I standing on the pier in 1972, wind in my hair, both of us laughing like fools. Only then did I go to the door. But it wasn't Karen. It was Jenna. She stood there, her backpack slung low, her face unsure, eyes flickering everywhere but mine. "Hi," she said. I nodded, stepped aside. "Come in." She walked in slowly, like she wasn't sure if she was allowed, like maybe she'd come too far on her own. We stood there in the hallway for a long moment, neither of us speaking. Then she looked up and asked, "Are you mad at me?" That caught me off guard. "Mad?" I said. "No, never." She looked relieved, but only slightly. "Mum's really upset," she said. "She says you're freezing us out, that you blocked her on everything." "She said that?" I asked. Jenna nodded. "She also said you're giving away the house." I raised my eyebrows. "Did she mention the cake?" Jenna went quiet. There it was. She looked down at her hands, picked at the sleeve of her hoodie. "It looked good," she whispered. "The cake. When I saw you walk in with it, I thought—" She stopped. "I thought it meant we'd have a slice together." I closed my eyes for a second. That small sentence undid me more than anything Karen had thrown. "You would have liked it," I said softly. "Same recipe as always. Just a little less sugar. I'm not sweetening much these days." Jenna finally met my gaze. "Why did you leave?" I led her into the kitchen and poured us each a glass of water, sat down across from her. "I left," I said, "because I was treated like something disposable, like I didn't belong." But it was just— "No," I interrupted gently. "Don't finish that sentence, sweetheart. Because if someone had done it to you, spoken to you that way, dismissed you in front of people, I'd be the first one to tell you to walk out." She bit her lip. "It wasn't about the cake," I added. "It was about what it represented, that I still believed I had something to offer. And your mother made it clear I was mistaken." She was silent for a while, then said, "She gets tense around parties and guests. She's always trying to make everything perfect." "At the cost of kindness?" Jenna didn't answer. I reached into the drawer by the fridge and pulled out the envelope, set it in front of her. "What's this?" she asked. "A letter. For you. You can read it now or later. I wrote it because I wasn't sure when, or if, you'd come." She touched it like it might break. "Jenna," I said, my voice steady, "you are not responsible for your mother's behavior, but you are old enough now to start noticing the difference between habit and harm." She blinked fast. "Mum says you're cutting us off." "I'm setting boundaries," I replied. "That's not the same." "She's scared." So was I, for years. Scared to be alone, scared to be the bad guy, scared to lose my family. But you know what I've realized? If people only stay close because you pay for the privilege, then you've already lost them. Jenna sat back, holding the envelope. "What now?" "That's up to you," I said. A long pause. Then she asked, "Can I still visit you, even if Mom says I shouldn't?" I smiled. "You're always welcome here, but I won't ask you to lie to your mother. That's a choice you'll have to make." She nodded. "I'll figure it out." Then she looked around. "Do you still have any of that cake?" I stood, went to the freezer, and pulled out the container. "I saved a few slices," I said. "Didn't know for who. Now I do." Jenna stayed for an hour. We didn't talk about money, or wills, or bank accounts. We sat at the kitchen table and ate the cake, and she told me about school, about a teacher she liked, about a boy in her class who didn't know how to shut up, about a poem she wrote that her mother said was too dark. It was about someone disappearing, she said, stirring her tea. But not like dying, more like being erased. I looked at her. "That's not too dark," I said. "That's just honest." She glanced up, surprised. "You think so?" "I know so." Her shoulders relaxed a little and she smiled. It was a small thing, but it felt enormous. After she left, the house felt less heavy. Not full, not yet, but less hollow. That night, I didn't turn my phone off. I didn't mute the ringer or hide it in a drawer. I just let it be. If Karen called, she called. If she didn't, well, that said plenty too. In the morning, I made a list. Not of chores or groceries, but of things I wanted to do. Things I'd pushed aside for years, waiting for the right time. Read the mystery novel I'd bought last winter. Repaint the old cabinet in the back room. Call Linda from church. I hadn't spoken to her since before Harold died. Get new curtains for the bedroom, something light. It wasn't a bucket list. It was a reclamation. Midway through writing, the phone rang. I glanced at the screen. Karen. I let it ring twice before answering. "Mom," she said. "Finally." "Good morning," I replied, not warmly, not coldly. There was a pause. "I think we need to talk. In person." "About what?" "You know what. You've been making moves that affect the whole family." I smiled at the phrasing. "Karen," I said, "nothing I've done affects you unless you've built your life on my silence." Another pause. "I'm not going to argue over the phone," she said tightly. "We're coming by." We. Jenna and I. Today, around 4. I almost said no, almost said I didn't want my granddaughter used as an emotional escort. But something told me to wait. "All right," I said. 4 is fine." The rest of the day moved slowly. I made the bed, wiped the windowsills, arranged the remaining slices of cake on a plate, just in case. At exactly 4:03, they pulled into the driveway. Karen walked in first. Jenna followed quietly. "Sit," I said, motioning to the table. Karen sat, arms crossed. Jenna sat beside her, eyes on me. "I want to start by saying I think you've blown this all out of proportion," Karen began. "It was a party, a little chaos. Maybe I said something that came out wrong." "You said, 'We don't eat poor people's food,'" I said evenly. Karen flushed. "It was a joke." No one laughed. She looked down at her hands. "You embarrassed me." I leaned forward slightly. "By bringing a homemade cake to my granddaughter's birthday?" Karen didn't answer. "I've embarrassed myself plenty over the years," I said, "but not by loving my family." "Okay," she said, voice tightening. "Let's say I was out of line. Why this? Why the money? The trust? The secrecy?" "Because I had to put something in writing that said I matter, since words stopped meaning anything." Karen opened her mouth to reply, but Jenna spoke first. "Mum," she said softly, "why did you say that about the cake?" Karen blinked. "What?" "You hurt her." Karen looked stunned, then defensive. "I was trying to create something nice, polished, not messy." Jenna shook her head. "You made it empty." That landed like a stone on the table. "I don't want to talk about money anymore," I said. "Not today." "Then what do you want?" Karen asked. "I want you to understand that I'm not your safety net, not your default setting. I'm a person. And I'm done being erased." Jenna reached for my hand under the table. Karen looked at both of us. Something in her face changed, not softening, not quite, but cracking. "I need to think," she said finally. "I didn't expect this." "Good," I said. Neither did I. After they left, I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel vindicated. I felt tired. Not the kind of tired that sleep fixes, the kind that settles into your bones when you've carried something too long, and finally set it down. I washed the plates, folded the napkins Jenna had used, put the half-eaten cake away. Then I sat in my chair by the window and just listened to the evening settle. At dusk, the neighborhood softened. Cars quieted, lights flicked on in kitchens. Somewhere a screen door slammed. Ordinary life. The phone stayed silent. I thought about what Karen had said before leaving. I need to think. Not an apology, not really. But not an attack either. That alone was new. I wasn't holding out hope for a miracle. I'd learned not to bargain with disappointment. But it was something. And something, these days, was enough. The next morning, I woke early. My joints ached the way they always did when the weather turned damp. I ran hot water over my hands at the sink and watched the steam rise. On the counter sat the envelope I hadn't mailed. The letter to Jenna. She'd read it now, I knew. I hadn't asked, didn't need to. She was different when she left yesterday, more grounded, like she'd touched something true and was trying to carry it carefully. At 10, I had an appointment with the notary, the final signature for the trust paperwork. The office was small and smelled of toner and carpet cleaner. The notary, a tall woman with a calm face, offered me a seat and flipped to the flagged pages. "You've listed your granddaughter as sole beneficiary," she said, "with full control starting at age 25. "Yes." "And the restriction on parental involvement. You're firm on that?" "As stone," I said. She didn't blink, just nodded and passed me the pen. I signed. And with that, the last string was cut, not out of spite, out of necessity. On the way home, I stopped by the farmer's market and bought fresh bread and a small jar of blackberry jam. I didn't need them, but I wanted them. That was enough reason. Back at home, I made tea, buttered a slice of bread, and sat on the porch. The sun came and went behind the clouds. I watched birds gather on the power lines like punctuation marks. The mailbox clattered. I walked down the path, slippers soft against the concrete, and opened it. Inside was a card. No return address, just my name written in careful young handwriting. I opened it right there, standing in the driveway. Inside were 5 words. "Thank you for seeing me." No signature. But I knew it was from Jenna. I smiled, not a wide grin, just that quiet lifting at the edges that comes when the world surprises you in a good way. I slipped the card into my pocket and stood for a moment longer. The wind tugged at the hem of my cardigan. I wasn't who I had been last week, or the week before that. I wasn't trying to be. For the first time in years, I was living for myself. Not in rebellion, in return, for all the things I'd once given without question. And slowly, one step at a time, I was learning to receive. 2 days later, my front door opened without a knock. I was in the kitchen, peeling apples for a crumble, when I heard the creak of hinges and the unmistakable shuffle of footsteps that weren't mine. "Mom?" Karen's voice called out, uncertain. I didn't answer right away. Not out of pettiness. I just wanted to see if she'd come in or retreat. She came in. I wiped my hands, turned off the stove, and met her in the hallway. She looked tired. Her eyes were red-rimmed, like she'd either been crying or fighting sleep for nights. She was holding something, a manila envelope. "I know I should have called," she said quickly. "I just didn't think you'd pick up." She wasn't wrong. "I didn't come to argue," she added. "I came to return something." She handed me the envelope. It was sealed but soft, like whatever was inside had been handled too many times. I opened it slowly. Inside were photographs, dozens of them. Me holding Jenna as a baby. Karen on the porch, younger, smiling in a way she hadn't in years. Harold in the garden, laughing at something out of frame. "I found them in a box in the garage," she said. "I didn't even know I still had them. They were under a pile of Christmas decorations." I looked through them silently, each one tugging something loose in my chest. Karen sat down at the kitchen table without being invited. I followed. She didn't speak for a while, just looked at her hands. Then, "I was embarrassed," she said quietly. "Not of you. Of myself." I raised my eyebrows. That party, the birthday, I felt so out of control. Everything had to be perfect, because I was so afraid of what people would think. And I took it out on you, like I always do. I didn't interrupt. "I don't know why I do it," she continued. Maybe because I know you'll forgive me. You always have. Silence stretched between us. Then I said, "That's not forgiveness. That's fear of breaking things." She nodded slowly. "I think I broke it anyway." "Maybe that's what it needed," I said. Karen looked up. Her eyes were glistening. "I don't know how to fix it." "You don't," I said. "You stop trying to fix. You start learning how to respect." She didn't answer, just let her tears fall. I got up, poured her a glass of water, set it on the table. "You've built a life," I said gently. "Your own life. But don't pretend it was built alone." She looked at me, wide-eyed. "I didn't mean to shut you out." "But you did." "I know." We sat for a while in that fragile peace. "I saw the letter," she said at last. My stomach tightened. "Jenna showed it to me. She wanted to. She said it explained more than I ever had." I waited. "She's right," Karen added. "You were the one who showed up. Always. Even when I didn't." I folded the envelope with the pictures, set it aside. "This doesn't mean I'm undoing anything," I said. "The money, the trust, my choices, they stand." "I know. This isn't a reset. It's a boundary." "I know," she repeated. "I'm not asking for anything." That was new. She looked around the room like she was seeing it for the first time. The chipped paint on the window frame, the teacups hanging on the wall, the scar on the table where Jenna once dropped a candle. "I miss being here," she said. "Then don't come as a guest," I told her. "Come as a daughter, when you're ready." She nodded, swallowed hard. Before she left, she hugged me. Not tightly, not dramatically. Just a quiet press of arms, like a memory trying to stay. When the door closed behind her, I sat down and breathed. Not relief, exactly. Something older, something gentler. Like forgiveness this time was finally something we could both live with. The next morning, I found myself walking without meaning to, past the bakery, past the school where Karen once played in the snow, past the old bus stop that hadn't changed since 1978. My feet led me without asking permission. They took me to a place I hadn't been in years, St. Martin's Church, where Harold and I were married, where Jenna was christened, where I used to bring warm bread and old coats for the donation bin. The front door was open. It always was. Inside, it smelled of old books, beeswax, and dust that had settled into the pews like a second congregation. A few candles flickered near the altar. No one else was there. I sat in the third pew from the front, Harold's favourite. He used to say it was close enough to hear, but far enough to escape if the sermon got boring. He had that kind of humour, gentle and just a little sideways. I didn't pray. I just sat. Let the silence wrap around me. Let the ache in my chest breathe. I thought of everything that had happened. The party, the cake, the walk out, the letter, the visits, the photos, the apology that didn't ask to erase the past but nodded to it, at least. I hadn't wanted redemption, but I had wanted to stop being invisible. That I'd done. After a while I stood, lit a candle, not for forgiveness, not for anyone else's soul. Just a small light, something warm in the quiet. Back at home, there was a letter waiting in the mailbox, handwritten, my name in blue ink, no return address. I opened it slowly, careful with the envelope like it might tear if I breathed too hard. Inside was a single sheet of lined paper, folded twice. "Grandma," it read. "I read your letter 3 times. I didn't know you were carrying so much. I didn't know how much you gave, how much you still give, even when no one notices. Mom doesn't understand you. I don't think she ever really did. But I think I might. I think you're like the thread that keeps everything together. Quiet, steady, invisible most of the time. But without it, everything falls apart. I want you to know, I see you, I love you, and I'm not afraid to say that anymore. Love, Jenna. I sat on the porch and read it again, my fingers tracing the shape of her words. The way she curved the Y in you, the tiny heart she used to dot the I in Jenna. She hadn't done that in years. There was something in her letter that reminded me of myself at her age. Not the fearlessness, not yet, but the edge of it, the place where truth begins. That evening I made her favourite pasta, just in case she came by. She didn't, and that was all right. Some things don't arrive all at once. They arrive in pieces, like trust, like healing, like the first warm day after a long, cruel winter. Jenna came the next afternoon, just as I was pulling weeds from the side yard. She didn't knock, just stood quietly at the gate until I looked up. "I didn't want to interrupt," she said. "You're never an interruption," I replied, brushing soil from my hands. "Come in." She followed me around to the back, where the garden was just waking from its long sleep. The hydrangeas were pushing out their first green nubs, and the lavender looked half dead but stubborn, like it always did before surprising me. We sat on the bench by the shed. She didn't speak right away. I didn't rush her. "I read your letter again," she said finally. Then I read it to myself out loud, twice. I nodded, waited. "I've been thinking a lot," she continued, "about what you said, about respect, boundaries, the way people erase you without even realizing it." Her voice was careful, but clear. "I see how Mum does it," she said. "She talks over you. She laughs when it isn't funny. She calls it joking, but it always feels like something else." I stayed quiet. Let her say it her way. "I think I learned that from her," Jenna admitted. "I didn't mean to, but I think I started treating you like, I don't know, like furniture? Like you'd always be there, no matter what." I turned to her. "You're still young," I said, "but you're growing, and growing means noticing. That's more than most people do." She looked down at her hands, folded in her lap. "I don't want to forget what I see now." "Then don't," I said. "But don't carry guilt either. That's not what I wrote you for." She looked up. "Why did you write it?" "Because I wanted one thing to be clear," I said, "that love is not the same as silence, and that real love, the kind worth keeping, is the kind that can stand up and speak." She nodded, slowly, then asked, "Do you think Mum will change?" I gave her the answer I wish someone had given me years ago. I think people change only when it costs them something not to. She sat with that. Then, "Can I come here after school sometimes? Just to talk? Maybe do homework?" "Of course," I said. "I want to learn more about the things you used to do, like sewing and baking, and how you fixed things without throwing them away." My throat tightened a little. "I'd like that." We sat there as the light shifted, soft and gold. A breeze passed through the branches above us, and the wind chimes near the back door gave a low, slow sound. Jenna leaned her head on my shoulder. She hadn't done that in years. "I missed this," she whispered. So did I. Neither of us said anything else for a while. We didn't need to. The days began to settle into something new. Not a routine, exactly. More like a rhythm. Jenna came over twice that week after school, her backpack slung low, her cheeks pink from the wind. She'd sit at the kitchen table, spread out her books, and talk to me between algebra problems and essay drafts. She asked about things she never had before, not just, "How are you?" but real questions. About my first job, about the way Harold and I met, about how I raised Karen without losing my mind. I told her the truth, not the polished version. It was hard, I said once, as I sliced apples for a pie. There were days I wanted to walk out the door and never come back. But I didn't. Not because I was noble, because I didn't know I had permission. She watched me peel, then asked, "Permission from who?" I smiled. That's the question, isn't it? We laughed. It felt good, easy, like water finding its way back to its source. Karen didn't call that week. I wasn't surprised. And I wasn't waiting. I'd made myself a promise that I wouldn't reach out first, not out of pride, out of preservation. I needed to know what she would do when I stopped filling the silence for her. One evening, Jenna brought over a photo album she'd started. She'd printed out pictures from her phone, a rare thing for a girl her age. Most kids let their memories float in clouds now. But there they were, on glossy paper, her birthday at age 7, holding my hand, a baking session from 2 summers ago where we'd both been covered in flour, a selfie from the porch, my glasses crooked, both of us laughing. She'd labelled each one. Summer hands, cinnamon day, the good window. I asked about the last one. She pointed to the photo, us sitting side by side, light coming through the window behind us. It's the only place where I never felt watched. That landed heavy in my chest. Heavy and warm. We pasted the photos together, side by side. She picked the order. I held the glue stick. It was a kind of ceremony, though we didn't say so. Later that night, after she left, I sat in the stillness and let it wash over me. The change. This wasn't about money anymore, or cake, or even Karen, not really. It was about a girl who saw something worth holding on to, and a woman, older now, who finally believed she deserved it. I walked through the house before bed, turning off the lights room by room. I paused at the hallway mirror and looked at myself, not out of vanity, just to see. The lines on my face were deeper, my shoulders not as square. But there was something else there now, something steadier. I'd started to come back to myself, not the version they needed, the version I'd forgotten I could be. The last Saturday of that month, I woke up to the smell of rain on the roof and the sound of birds arguing in the trees outside my window. Everything felt damp and close. The kind of day that makes you want to wear thick socks and leave something slow cooking on the stove. I made tea, buttered a heel of bread, and sat at the kitchen table, listening to the rhythm of the weather. At 9:40, the doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone. I opened it to find Karen standing there, umbrella dripping, eyes unsure. "Hi," she said. I stepped aside. She walked in. No makeup, no heels. Just jeans and an old sweater I recognized. It used to be mine. "I didn't call first," she said, voice low. "I wasn't sure you'd answer." "I'm here," I said. She nodded, took off her coat, and stood awkwardly in the hallway. For a moment, I thought she might cry. But she didn't. "I read your letter to Jenna," she said, still not looking at me. "She left it out." I wasn't supposed to, I know. But I did. I waited. "It hurt," she admitted. Not because it wasn't true, but because I could see every part of me in it. Every cold word, every eye roll, every silence I gave you when I should have given something else. I sat down, motioned for her to join me. She did, carefully, like the chair might not hold her. "I think I punished you," she said. "All these years? For being the one who stayed when Dad left. For being the person I leaned on too hard. For loving me in ways I didn't want to owe." I looked at her. Really looked. She wasn't the child I'd raised. She wasn't the woman who'd dismissed me at the party. She was someone else now. Maybe not new, but peeled back to something more raw. I don't expect you to undo anything, she added. I know what you changed. The will, the trust, the boundaries. I'm not here to argue. Then why are you here? She took a breath. Because I want to learn, if you'll let me. We sat in that sentence for a long time. No movement, no rush. Just two women with the same chin and the same stubborn streak, finally facing the space between them. I poured her tea. We drank in silence. After a while, she asked, "What do I do now?" "You stop performing," I said. "You speak like someone who knows words leave marks. You remember that love doesn't excuse cruelty. You show up, not to fix things, but to feel them." She nodded. "That sounds hard." "It is," I said, "and it's worth it." Later, after she left, I opened the window a crack to let in the smell of wet earth and something else. Something clean. The house was quiet again, but not empty. In the evening, Jenna came by. She wore a yellow raincoat and carried a book of poems under her arm. "I want you to read this one," she said. "It reminded me of you." She opened to a page, held it up. It was a short poem, just a few lines. About a woman who plants seeds she'll never see bloom, who waters things others forget, who keeps light in a jar for when the power goes out. At the bottom, Jenna had written, "That's you." I didn't cry, but my chest felt full in the best kind of way. That night, I wrote something too, not a letter. Just a sentence on the back of a receipt, in the dark. I mattered. Even when they didn't say it. I folded it and placed it in the drawer with the others, notes to myself, tiny truths I'd collected like stones. And when I turned out the light, I didn't feel small. I didn't feel forgotten. I felt like a woman who had come home to herself and opened the door and let herself stay. If you're reading this and something in it feels familiar, keep this with you. We're not too old to choose ourselves. We're not too late to draw a line and say, "I won't be less just to keep the peace." We're not done. Not yet. Not ever. Take care of yourself, like you once took care of everyone else. The world will adjust, and if it doesn't, let it learn.